Hello, welcome to another episode of Field of Screams podcast. Today we will be covering Friday the 13th, Part 6. Part 6 is a conclusion to the Tommy Jarvis saga. The studio was actually originally going to put Tommy as the antagonist. Tommy was going to be the Jason killer for this movie. But after seeing the box office results and seeing the critic reviews and the literal backlash they got from Roy being the killer, they decided to shift gears and they're like, okay, we're going to make this focus on Jason because that's what the people want. The studio brought in Tom McLaughlin to direct this film and help write it. When he sat down and was trying to figure out what to do with this franchise, he marathoned all the movies that have been made so far, and after seeing A New Beginning, he kind of realized that the franchise needed something different. He couldn't just repeat the same formula. I mean, we have 1 through 5, and 2 through 5, while there is subtle differences, you don't want to keep repeating things. The franchise already had a knack on itself where people are saying it's the same thing every movie. So he wanted to change the atmosphere a little bit, make it a little more gothic. And it was pretty tongue-in-cheek. It knew what it was very self-aware, and this movie actually had things that others didn't, like character development. It had actually pretty cool action scenes in it. And to me, at least, this film feels like a celebration of all the past films. I mean, Jason's right in the forefront. This movie knows what it wants to do. They have Alice Cooper with 3 hit songs back in this movie. Not to mention he has a music video that features Jason a lot. This movie's packing. And a lot of people like it. I haven't heard of too many people that dislike this movie in the franchise. And rightfully so, it's a pretty good installment. Now let's talk about the beginning of this film. I mean, Tommy, they had to reshape his character a bit. Tommy was very tense. You almost suspected him to be the killer in the 5th one, and they did that on purpose. It was a whodunit film. But I mean, this one, if they're going to conclude with Tommy, and they're going to make him the actual hero, the for sure hero, I mean, they got to make him a little charismatic, not as tense. Talks a lot more in this movie. But I mean, the first thing he's going to do is take his friend and drive down to the cemetery and make sure Jason's still there, dead. Now, the first thing that I thought while watching this opening scene is Tommy in the 5th one. He literally has a dream of 2 grave robbers going to Jason's grave, digging it up, and as they dig it up, Jason rises up and kills both of them. So you would think Tommy, after having these nightmares of this happening, he would not drive to the cemetery to check on Jason's grave. I think if I were Tommy, I would just get as far away as possible. But I mean, we gotta bring Jason back, so this is what Tommy does. Tommy brings a friend, and they go and check out the grave. Despite me fussing over the intent to go check on Jason, the execution of this scene does work really well. I mean, this scene starts off goth as can be. It's really dark. It's a dark cemetery. They dig up the grave, him and his buddy Alan Hawes. And while they're digging up, Alan does a little foreshadowing. He's like, I don't know if my heart can take it. But Tommy doesn't care. Tommy keeps digging. They open up the grave. Jason's dead. He's like a skeleton covered in like maggots and worms. And it's like raining. It looks really cool and gross. And then Tommy, of course, going back to his old habits as a kid, grabs this big like steel pole and like stabs his corpse with it and is like, die! Just like in the 4th one. But as he stabs the corpse, lightning strikes into that rod, and it actually strikes it twice, I think. But after the second strike, it brings Jason back to life. Like he looks almost built. Like it's funny because the corpse is like really tiny and rotted and gross. But once that lightning strikes, like Jason's full figure again. I mean, he's burnt. You can tell he's zombie. And this is the definite start to zombie Jason. He is no longer redneck, running around in the woods Jason. This is now zombie Jason. And to complete the foreshadowing, Jason punches Alan's heart right out of his body. And that begins this movie. And to let you know that they're being tongue-in-cheek, they do the James Bond intro, where he kind of slashes the title card. It's great. It's a great opening. From this moment, Tommy goes to the sheriff's office to let them know that Jason has returned. And Jason has returned to Camp Forest Green, which they changed the name, which it does make sense, I think, after a big massacre and all that stuff. They probably would want to change the name of the camp. You wouldn't want to keep calling it Camp Crystal Lake or Camp Blood. That would drive the tourist away. Though, I mean, by the way these movies go, like, everyone's trying to get to Camp Crystal Lake for some reason. When Tommy talks to Sheriff Garris, at first I'm kind of like, oh, it's that typical mean cop that doesn't believe anyone, but that's not really the case with Sheriff Garris. There's kind of a cool relationship between Tommy, Garris, and Garris's daughter, Megan. And it's all kind of odd, and it comes out of left field. I mean, Megan, as soon as she sees Tommy, she's like, "Ooh, he's kind of cute." And she's immediately, like, on his radar. Like, she wants him bad. And Garris is a good sheriff. He wants to take care of his rebellious daughter. And he's also pretty... He understands where Tommy's coming from. He knows that Tommy had a lot of trouble. And even the times where he arrests him, he's kind of like, "Listen, I know what you've been through, but I can't have you running around town screaming Jason's back. That dude is dead." So you understand his point of view. I mean, there's even moments to where Tommy grabs the sheriff's gun. I mean, that's a huge no-no. Ava Max even made a song, Sweet But Psycho, and I believe the lyrics were, "Grab a cop gun, kinda crazy." And that's exactly what Tommy is. But even after he does this, I mean, yeah, Garris locks him up for a bit. But I mean, in the end, he just tries to drop him out of the town. Like, he just doesn't want chaos going around town. He doesn't charge him with anything. And he understands Tommy's had a rough past again. So, you know, there's good things about Sheriff Garris. And you kind of like him as a character as the movie's going. While Tommy's pulling shenanigans with the sheriff, we do have our first camp counselors that fall victim to Jason, Darren, and Elizabeth. They're driving around lost looking for Camp Forest Green. I don't know, the name just throws me off, but while they're doing that, they pull up and they see Jason standing there with the hockey mask, and when they see it, Elizabeth goes, "We need to get out of here. All I know is from scary movies, anyone wearing a mask is a complete psycho." You know, once again, this film is very self-aware. This actually inspired the writer of Scream to write the script like he did. He liked how this film was very self-aware. So in a way, this film was very ahead of itself with the meta-ness. Jason, of course, stabs Darren with that pole and basically tosses him over his shoulder like he's some kind of Build-A-Bear. And then Elizabeth falls backward into the mud, and they do a really cool scene to where she's looking around. It's like Jason disappeared, and then he appears really quick, and he like jumps down. His feet are like right by her face, and he stabs her face and holds her underwater and waits until she drowns. I think the actress who played Elizabeth was actually, I think it was the director's wife. I know she was a wife of one of the uppers. I think it was the director, McCaughlin. And of course, when she finally dies, her credit card, they were going to use American Express, just floating in the puddle. But American Express wouldn't let them have the rights to use their card, so they made an American Excess card instead. It's just kind of a ha-ha. As Garris tries to take Tommy out of city limits, Tommy pulls some evasive maneuvers, and he actually does a smart thing, which I question. I said, why don't you just show them the grave? And that's exactly what he does. He runs and he escapes from Garris, and as they're following him, he goes straight to the gravesite. And at this point, we actually meet him a little bit sooner, but we run into the caretaker character, who is just a joke character. That's what he's for. And earlier, whenever we see him, he kind of looks at it, and he looks right into the camera, and he says, "Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment. And that's kind of a joke, just kind of, if you're watching this movie, that's kind of aimed at you. It's kind of a funny moment. The caretaker has some other funny lines. One of them is just an editing joke to where he's looking and he goes, "Does he think I'm a fart head?" And then it cuts to the camper kids and they're like, "Yeah!" And it's just kind of a silly moment. And then the very end of the caretaker, he is drinking liquor and he looks at the bottle and says, "Darling, you're going to be the death of me." And he tosses it over his shoulder. And of course Jason's right there, catches the bottle, breaks it, and then stabs him with it. And that's the end of the caretaker. I do like the caretaker as a character. It's really goofy, but it's funny. Again, it's self-aware. He definitely belongs in this movie. I like him. The caretaker's death scene, along with another couple, Stephen and Annette, who are double stabbed with a machete, those kills were actually added after the movie. Those were filmed during reshoots because whenever they showed the movie, people said that Jason didn't kill enough people. So, yeah, sometimes reshoots are a good thing. You get more kills that way. So, it worked out. Now, by this point of the film, some of the other camp counselors, they're becoming aware that Annette and Steven, they're missing. Garrus is kind of on edge. I mean, bodies are starting to pile up. One thing that was interesting is the counselors, while they're playing cards, they're treating Jason as if he's some mythological figure. I think they even have a talk of is he really real? Could he be around? And I mean, the timeline of these movies, the timelines are never good. But there was a huge massacre between 2, 3, and 4. And I believe 5 took place, maybe a year after those movies. And then I think this movie supposedly is a year after that. So it's 2 years of passing. You would definitely, the counselors know about him, but I probably wouldn't be using him in card games like they are. I don't know, people have different senses of humor. But it just kind of struck me as weird. But again, the timelines are never followed that greatly in these films, so it is what it is. Now, something interesting here. Friday the 13th Part 6 is the only movie to not contain nudity in the franchise. The only one. It does have a sex scene, though. Or at least a sexy scene. I don't know how you would label it. But our characters, Nikki and Court, who are also counselors, they're in this RV, and they're kind of having their romantic time. It shows them, but there's no nudity. They have their clothes on while they're doing their thing. And of course, the power goes out because of Jason's stalking, kind of roaming around the area, gets on the RV without them knowing. And this sequence is actually one of my favorite parts of the movie. And I think it's just a very underrated part because of what follows it. What follows this part is a really cool part, and it overshadows because of a reason. But the thing I like is that Cord is driving this RV, Nikki is in the back, kind of just doing her thing, and Cord has this Alice Cooper song playing. I think it's Teenage Frankenstein, and he's blaring it while he's driving, and he's flooring it, and Nikki's just kind of in the back. And Jason comes and attacks Nikki. He starts killing her. And while he's killing her, Cord is just driving this RV going, "Oh yeah, this is great. This is so great. Oh yeah, this is my jam." And I swear he says this is great about 9 times as Nikki's being murdered. Jason takes her into the bathroom, slams her face against the wall, and Court kind of turns around and he's like, "Are you taking a dump, Nikki?" And then he's like, "Do you need company, Nikki?" This is great. And just the way he's acting, it cracks me up. I think it is probably one of the funniest parts in the film, and I think it's a very underrated part. But it's a part I enjoy a lot. And of course, when Jason finally walks up and stabs Court, that's when the RV flips, and it's an extremely cool scene. It is the last scene they shot in this movie. But it is the money shot. It is the best shot of the film, where the RV just turns over, slides on the road, and then Jason climbs out and just stands on top of it. Awesome shot. And I think that's why that funny part kind of gets overshadowed, because it is just a very great sequence. Speaking of cool scenes, we do have another counselor, Sissy. She eventually gets her head twisted all the way around her body. That was a cool kill. We have Paula, who Jason just messes her up. By the time they walk in on the aftermath of Paula's kill, literally everything is covered with blood. The popcorn is covered with blood. The bed's covered with blood. Everything in the room, like Jason literally painted the room with blood. It was crazy graphic. And I mean, the censors always come after Friday the 13th hard. But I mean, these two kills are just creative ways to put a lot of blood and let your imagination do the work. And it's great. There's another wacky scene to where Megan offers to give Tommy a ride in her car. And because Tommy has this plan to stop Jason, and he's like, we gotta act quick. And Megan's like, get in the car. And Tommy's like, no, like, I gotta go alone. He's trying to be all heroic. And Megan's like, no. You get in the car. And she's like, I'm the only one who drives this puppy. Which is funny because a little bit later in the film, where they gotta go somewhere, Megan's like, yeah, you can drive. So, I mean, she makes this big claim that she's the only one who can drive the car, but a little bit later she kind of undoes it with just like, yeah, Tommy, take my car. Go ahead. I'll ride passenger. But, I mean, they did it for the sole purpose of this little gag to where Megan speeding down the road runs into cops and her dad, and there's like a police chase scene. She tells Tommy to get down. Tommy's head goes down, and then you just get Tommy looking at Megan's crotch as she's driving. And while she's driving, she's saying things like, yeah, that's what I want. Just a bunch of innuendos. Very silly scene. I don't know why they felt the need to put it in, but I mean, it just kind of belongs in the movie. And yeah, but eventually they get caught. And when they get caught, Garrus points his gun at his own daughter and tells her to get out. And they're kind of just like, oh, we're busted. He takes him to the police station. And then, of course, he gets a call because people are dying. So Garrus has to go. We have Tommy, who's locked up in the jail cell. We have Megan, who she isn't locked up. She's just kind of standing around in the jail like, Dad. And he's like, no, you're staying in here with Deputy Cologne. Now, Deputy Cologne is just one of those goofy characters, again, that belongs in a Friday the 13th franchise. Cologne, in the very beginning of the film, he has this gun that has a red laser pointer. And, of course, he points it at Tommy to show him. And he's like, you see that red dot? Wherever the red dot goes, ya bank. And when I went to rewatch this movie, I knew he said something weird. I was trying to recall what it was. I was like, was it shaboom? Was it boom clackalaka? No, it was just ya bank. That's his little catchphrase. He's trying to make it a thing. Maybe they thought that little phrase would have carried on somewhere, and that would have been something cool people said. You know, kids running around the streets with Nerf guns going, ya bank, ya bank. I mean, it doesn't age well, but that's Deputy Cologne for you. And of course, Cologne gets outsmarted by Megan and Tommy, and Megan and Tommy have this big bright plan of making out, and when Cologne steps up, Megan takes his gun, and then Cologne's just kind of like, Megan, and then they lock him up. So he is outsmarted very easily. But I had to talk about his character, because I do feel like his character is a pretty big part. Not a big part, but a funny part, I guess I should say. Now, since I'm talking about our funny, goofy characters, I do want to backtrack just a little bit to give these people a shout out. The paintball scene. I almost forgot. Very early in the movie, there is a paintball scene where a company went out to go paintballing, I guess. And this company that's paintballing, there's like 4 or 5 people. There's one who's like extremely misogynistic. A lady gets him out, she shoots him, and when she gets him out, he walks away and he takes like this machete and he just starts chopping branches like really violently, and he's like, "Oh, she should have stayed in the kitchen," like screaming it. And of course, these people, they're the people that you need in Friday the 13th movies to make it Friday the 13th movies. Like, they make you laugh, they're weird, they're not really realistic. I mean, maybe that dude is. Maybe there are some weird dudes like that. But they're just not very common. That's not how people commonly act, but that's what makes it funny. But he gets killed. Jason grabs him and throws him against a tree so hard that it leaves an imprint of a smiley face, and then there's like blood on it. Now, there's an argument, was that smiley face imprint already there, and he just made blood on it? Or did Jason throw him so hard that he made the smiley imprint himself, along with the blood? And it could go either way, because it's kind of just a goofy moment. But Jason did throw him pretty hard, because after he throws him, Jason's still holding his arm. He shoved him so hard that his arm ripped off as he threw him against the tree. So, he did do it pretty hard. 3 other people playing paintball. It was the lady that got the sexist guy out, and 2 other guys. She pops up, she shoots both of those guys, gets them out, and I guess when they get them out, they gotta put on these bandanas that say dead on them, and it's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek foreshadowing as to what's about to happen. And Jason pops in and does a cool little decapitation scene with all 3 of them. Pretty fun scene. But yeah, those are some other goofy people we had to talk about. I had to backtrack. But now we're back on track. Now we're getting near the climax of the film. And I mean, there's campers that have been at this camp like almost the entire movie. By this point where Jason's lurking around, there's kids that are asleep, and there's like one girl who sees Jason. Jason comes into her cabin or tent and just kind of walks up to her and looks at her. And there's a moment where you're like, "Oh, dude, come on, don't kill the kids. Don't kill that little girl. She's praying." And he walks up and he just kind of looks at her, and he takes a moment and he does nothing. I think it's kind of a telling thing that Jason isn't like Freddy Krueger. He's not even like Michael Myers. I think Jason is literally just out to get the camp counselors because, again, his motivation. And then there's not really a movie to where he kills kids, so it's just kind of an interesting thing. But these kids, they kind of bring some funny dialogue into the film. There's the one kid that says, "Oh, we're dead meat," which is a very popular line with the Dead Meat YouTube channel, for those who are familiar with them. And then there's also the conversation of, well, what were you going to be when you grew up? Just kind of funny lines there. Again, Friday the 13th does a great job casting kids to do their role, and this film's no different. To also add to that, there was a time to where I always kind of wondered, Part 6, does this movie really well with the campers present at the camp? And I've wondered, why didn't the other movies, do the same thing, put more at stake, If a kid's life is at stake, things are kind of more scarier. You don't want kids to die. And then when I reviewed a film called She Came from the Woods, and I just figured, having kids there would be a very easy thing to manage. But after watching that movie, I kind of took that opinion back, because that movie, in that movie, the kids kind of turn evil, and then the movie's a little bit more fun. But the kids are just kind of dreadful in that movie before they turn evil. They're trying to do one-liners, it just seems like they don't know what to do with them. They're on screen, it almost feels like a Disney product. So having the campers on set in the movie, it can be a hard task, and this movie does it really well. It's kind of flawless. Sometimes, when they're on screen, you don't question anything. You're like, oh yeah, they're just campers. It's not like she came from the woods where it's like, man, quit showing the kids. Like, I don't want to hear the kids talk anymore. So, I mean, this film does it really well. When we get to our climax of the film, Sheriff Garris does have a run-into with Jason. And he does so because Megan starts yelling for her dad. Jason hears her, he starts going for Megan. Garris then tries to distract him. Garris shoots him a lot of times. It does nothing. Bullets don't work against zombie Jason. This isn't typical Jason to where you can just put an axe in his head and he's down. That does not work. Garris shoots him in the head many times. It doesn't do anything. And eventually Garris falls victim to Jason. Jason does a really cool scene of where he just snaps Garris in half. And for the first time in a really long time in this franchise, I was sad that a character died. Because, again, I feel like Sheriff Garris had some character development. And when he goes, you're kind of like, no, I really wanted that dude to live. That stinks. So again, Sheriff Garris was just a very good character. But let's not be too sad that Garris dies, because Tommy and Megan get their revenge. The climactic scene between Tommy and Jason and Megan, they literally lure him out to the lake, and the lake is on fire. Whenever they're going at it, literally the lake is on fire. It's really cool. It's really the only appropriate way to end a movie like this. I mean, this movie does a great job. The ending's great. When you have the lake on fire, it's hard to top that. And they chain Jason down to a gigantic boulder. And of course, Jason's ruthless, he's trying to drag him down. And Megan saws into his neck with the boat propeller, which is just really graphic, dark blood shooting everywhere. And whenever they did this scene, they actually filmed it in 3 different spots. It was the pool in USC. That's where they shot the underwater shots. Whenever they're above water, they shot it at a really cold lake in Georgia. And whenever they did the kill scene, they used so much blood that they actually had to go to the director's mom's house and film that because they didn't want to dirty up and ruin the USC pool. So, yeah, very great climactic scene to end it. It was great. But of course, when Jason's down there, he opens his eyes and he's not really dead. You can't kill Jason anymore. It's zombie Jason. So yeah, very good movie overall. It's very self-aware of what it is by this point in the franchise. It's funny, cool action scenes, really good characters, really good kills, really good music. The song He's Back by Alice Cooper. I always think that's so catchy. It's catchier than it has any business being. It's a good song. But yeah, overall, very good movie. This kind of concludes the review for Part 6 of Friday the 13th. For those sticking around, I hope you enjoyed the review. Feel free to comment what you think about the film down below. Let me give a couple shout-outs from the last video. Cam GN6 UK. Talking about Part 5 of Friday the 13th, they put, I remember seeing this on Showtime when I was a kid. It's not perfect, but it's grown on me over the years. We also have Trav Zimmerman. He made the comment that Part 5 is the last film of the series with the look and feel of the originals. And I would agree, because Part 6 is kind of a departure. It doesn't really have that rough feel. So I definitely agree with that. And Citrus Cove, shout out to them. They commented on every one of the Friday the 13th films. And I really appreciate all the comments, guys, and all the interaction. That's awesome. It helps the channel. If you're out there listening, feel free to comment too. And if you haven't subscribed, feel free to do so. It lets you know when the next ones are posted, and I appreciate having you guys around and participating with the podcast. That's awesome. Awesome stuff. A lot of the Friday the 13th fans coming out of the woods, joining the podcast. It's a great feeling, guys. But next time we got Part 7, Carrie versus Jason. Until next time, guys.